Hello and welcome back to Digital Publishing Online, and I'm Lisa Gabrielle. And in this video, we're going to continue our discussion on setting up our InDesign document for brochure designs. And in the last video, I spoke to you about how to calculate the trim size or page size of your folded brochure. And you need to have that information to get started with this portion of the brochure design. And again, just to remind you, this is what we went over in the last video. And we made this calculation down here, and we determined that the page size or the trim size of our InDesign document was going to be 13.625. So knowing that information, we're going to proceed to start creating our InDesign layout. So over here in InDesign, I have this layout already created that I'm going to leave open to refer to, but I'm actually going to go through all the steps that I used to create this by creating a brand new document. But I may make reference to this document because it's sort of finished already, and it just speeds up the demonstration if I have something already finished to refer back to. Okay, so let's go ahead and start our new page. So in InDesign, you're going to go up to File, and you're going to pull down to New and start a new document. Okay. Now, I would suggest having preview on, and since preview is going to be turned on, then you will see this page being built behind this window here. It's kind of nice, interactive. Okay, so based on the last video, we determined that our document width is going to be 13.625. So we're going to put that in there, and we're going to also put 9 in here because that's the height that I want my document. Again, back to this example, this being the width this way, and this from here to here, top to bottom, is our height. Okay. All right. Now, I'm also going to turn off this feature at the top before we go any further here because we're not working on a facing page scenario here. Now, InDesign could create two kinds of pages, and I have a little chalkboard drawing here. In InDesign, you can create either a single page, which is this example here, and on your book designs from the last project, you were creating single pages in InDesign over and over repetitively. You created 34 single pages. In this class, we won't be creating a two-page spread, but if you take my basic graphic design class, you'll get a chance to work with a two-page spread. But the other kind of setup that you can plug into InDesign is a two-page spread scenario, and InDesign uses the terminology facing pages, but basically what it is two pages next to each other, which create what they call in the industry a spread. Okay, and that's this example here. But we won't be using that for this brochure design because we'll be working with one single page that we're going to rule out based on the panel dimensions that we determined in the last video. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off facing pages. The other thing we're going to look at here is our margins. And again, I'm going to go back to the video here. And I've been showing you this example here for a couple of times in the previous videos, and right now we're looking at the inside of this brochure, and you can kind of see that there's some varying margins. There's it looks like about 1/4 of an inch at the top. Looks like we've got about a 1/2 inch over here, about a 1/2 inch on this side, and about a 1/2 inch on the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and use the same dimensions for this document. So over here to set different dimensions other than the same dimension all the way around, I'm going to turn off this little lock feature right here. And I'm going to put 0.25 for my top, and my bottom will be 1/2 inch. My left and right margins will be a 1/2 inch. Okay. Now, I spoke to you about bleed, and I believe it was 2 videos ago when I was going over the different anatomy of a page layout, and I mentioned that we will be using bleed. Again, what is bleed? Bleed is when you have graphics like this graphic over here that kind of uh, bleed off to the very trim edge. Also, there's a lot of bleed on this side of the brochure. Most of the time, students design brochures that include bleed. So I would say you'd be best to put a bleed dimension in here because you'll probably be using it. So we're going to go ahead and put 1/8 of an inch in here, which is the industry standard for bleed. And if we click this little sparkle here, it will populate the all the fields, top, bottom, left, and right, as you can kind of see there. Okay, so we have determined the width and height of our page. We're going to leave columns at default. We're going to set a margin with a 1/4 inch on top and a 1/2 inch everywhere else, and then we're going to set up an 1/8 of an inch bleed. And you can kind of see this happening out here. This little red line that you see around the page, that's an indication of bleed. This pink line that you see on the inside of the page is an indication of a margin. And everything inside here would be considered the trim, or I'm sorry, the live area, all the content that we'll print. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and say okay. All right, so we have our document set up. So we're ready to move forward on gridding out all of our different panels. Okay, now going back here to our handouts, we finished with this handout. I'm going to bring up that first handout, this one here. Okay, so in essence, what you see on this handout is what we're about to do right now in InDesign. So you can refer to this handout if you're not sure of all the things that you need to have in your InDesign document. Pretty much these are the things I'll be looking for. I'll be looking that you set up your trim size properly based on those calculations. I'll be looking that you have margins in your document based on what I have here. Okay, see I have margins. I'll also be looking that you have fold lines, and we're going to do those as well. And I'll be looking to see if you've got each panel marked and you've got margins on both sides of the folds of each panel. So that's what we're going to do right now. So you can refer back to this handout if you need to. All right, so I have all this written down on my little cheat sheet here. So I'm going to go ahead and if your ruler system is not turned on, you need to go under View and turn on your rulers if it says hide, but my rulers are showing. You can also do Command R. So Command R will turn on and off your ruler. Okay, so you're going to need to grab a guide. So put your cursor into your ruler and pull a guide out. And you can kind of see this little gray field here that is displaying whereabouts we are on the page. We're going to use that field to drag across and measure out our panel. Since we have already determined that our first panel is going to be 3.375, I'm going to drag out. And when you do this, you want to do it so that and again, I'm going to size this down a little bit here. Let me grab this so you can see this, okay? Okay, so you want to drag, let me put that back. So you're going to grab, basically I just size that down so that you can see what I'm doing. When you grab that guide out of the ruler, you want to kind of stay in the clipboard region instead of in the page region, because you see the difference between the guide. When you're in the page region, it cuts off the guide at the trim edge. When you're in the clipboard region, your guide extends all the way to the very top and bottom. And we're going to need those guides in our clipboard area when we go to draw our fold lines. So it's important that you make sure that you pull that guide out in the clipboard area. So I'm going to drag this until I get to 3.375. The other thing you can do if you're not one of those people who likes to pull guides out and watch that smart dimension is you can come up here in this upper field and you can actually type in 3.375 and it'll set that guide where it's supposed to be. Okay. All right. So that's one panel fold. All right. So I'm going to pull another guide out. Now I'm just going to drop it anywhere and I'm going to type in 6.8125 because that's the next location of our guide. And oops, I made a mistake. What I didn't do was drag the guide out. So I just grabbed the guide and dragged it out into the clipboard so that it is extending all the way across the clipboard as well as across the trim page here. Okay. All right. So I've got that one in. And I'm going to go ahead and grab one more guide, just drop it randomly, and I'm going to come over here and type in 10.25. Okay. All right. So we have our 3 panels marked out. How about that? Pretty simple. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to rule out our margins around each panel. So basically, if your panel's folding here at this guide and at this guide, what you're going to want to know is where should you line up your text, because you don't want to line it up to the fold, because if you line it up to the fold, when the paper folds, it's going to fold across your text, and you don't want that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab another guide over here, and I'm just going to pull it, and I'm going to do this visually for this demonstration. And you could do this one from within the document because you really don't need to have your margins indicated in the clipboard. So we're going to pull our cursor in, and I'm just going to kind of visually give myself about it looks like about 1/8 of an inch. Actually, I think I might go 1/4. So I'm going to grab this, and I'm going to, and again, what I would suggest is that you do the math and figure out what 1/4 would be on both sides. In this example that I had over here, the flag, I actually did 1/8, but for this one we're doing today in the demonstration, I'm going to add 1/4 in because I kind of like it better. All right, we're going to go like that. So we're putting a margin around our fold. See how we have that there? And then something like about there. Okay. All right. So simply in a few minutes, we've got now all of our panels indicated. We've got a margin around our entire document as well as we've got margins around our folds. And the last thing we need to do here is draw our fold lines. And again, over to this document, I have the parameters for drawing fold lines right here. So that's the parameters that we're going to set up our folds at. So back to our page layout here. I'm going to grab the line tool. And when I grab the line tool, I get some features up here to set my line to. So back to that document again, I'm going to set my rule type to a dashed line 3-2. So I'm going to pull this down to dashed, and oh, I'm sorry, 3-2, this one right here. So dash line 3-2, and then I'm going to set my weight right here to 0.5. So I've got a rule weight of 0.5 and I've got a rule type of dashed 3-2. Okay, and it's set to black. You can check that in your swatches. Make sure it's set to black here. All right. And we're going to draw up from our bleed edge 0.25 inches, so about 1/4 of an inch. So basically what I suggest you do is grab your zoomer tool, and we're going to drag zoom around this location right here. Okay, so this red line is your bleed edge, and we're going to start at that edge and we're going to draw up 1/4 of an inch. All right, so back to the line tool, make sure everything's set, and put your cursor on the bleed edge there and line it up with the guide, and we're going to draw up. And as you can kind of see, it tells you, the smart guide is telling you there how far up. You can also type it in here, 0.25, and that will, over here in this region here for L, it gives you the line height. Okay, you can type it in and you can kind of see that I have just drawn a dotted line starting at the bleed edge and dragging up. Okay, so now Command 0 to put yourself back into fit to window. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom up on the top portion of this layout. Okay, all right, and I'm going to hold down my Shift key and hover over that drawn line over here. Hover, and I'm going to drag. And that double arrow means that I'm duplicating that line. And I'm just going to drag a duplicate over and line it up on that second guide in the same exact place, above the bleed edge and on top of that second fold line or fold guide. Okay. So I'm going to hold down the Shift key to pan over, and I'm going to hold down the Option key to get the double arrow and drag again over to that third fold. Okay. Whoops, it looks like I moved it a little, so I'm going to give it a little notch over. Okay, so I've got 3 folds drawn there, and if I Command minus, it puts me back. And if I Command colon, you can kind of see that I've drawn 3 fold lines, indicating where on my document this gets folded. Okay. Now, for no reason should these fold lines ever intrude inside the print area. They should always be outside the bleed edge, kind of like you see here. They should always be set where they are there. Okay. And the next thing we're going to do is Command colon to turn our guides back on. And again, I'm going to drag select with my selection tool and select all 3 of those, hold down my Option key again, and I'm going to drag down and duplicate those fold lines at the bottom of my layout. So if I Command colon again, you'll see that I have a set of fold lines here and a set of fold lines down here. Okay. And if I turn on my guides again, you'll see that those fold lines are sitting exactly on the folds of my brochure. Okay. So what you would need to do at this point, since you've got one page ruled up, is to come back to your Pages document and grab one of these blank masters and drag it down. Okay. Okay, this one there. That one didn't have the right dimensions for the margins. Okay, I've got that. There you go. All right, so now that I've got a second page, we're just going to duplicate this entire set. So I'm going to select those by just grabbing my selection here, and I just do a drag select. You see how I'm doing here, and it selects all those. I'm going to hold down the Option key again till I get my double arrow, and I'm going to drag down to my second page, put it into view here, and I'm going to well, before I do that, actually Command Z that. Okay, well, before I do that, what I have to do on my second page before I duplicate those guides, actually, what I could do, simply said, nix the suggestion to create a master page here. I'm going to go ahead and delete this. And instead, it'll be a lot easier to just grab this page right here, since it's already been ruled up and it already has fold lines on it, and right mouse click and do a duplicate spread. And now we've got 2 pages all ready to go. You see what I just did there? And if I turn off my guide, you can kind of see that I've got my 2 front and back pages ready to go. Okay, so sorry about that. Last suggestion to create a master page, just click on the page, right mouse click it, and duplicate spread, and that will make a second page. Now, when does this work and when does this not work? Okay, let me talk about something, and I'm going to have to put my video up here. Okay. Now, what I just did is perfect for a gatefold. okay, where the short panels, that's these outer edges, outer two panels, are exactly the same no matter whether you're looking at it from the front or from the inside or back. Okay. However, if you're working on a trifold, okay, trifold's a little bit tricky. And the reason a trifold is tricky is because when you open up the trifold, okay, let's do that again. Let's do that slowly. Okay, so here's a trifold. I open it up, and this panel, this one right here, is my short panel. Okay, that's this panel right here. Now, when I flip this brochure around, watch what happens. Where's my short panel now? It's over here. Okay, so what we just did, duplicate spread, would not work if you're doing a trifold because your short panel will be on this side for when you're looking at the inside, and on the outside or the back, it is the other side of the page. So you would have to flop your short panels so that the artwork lays out properly. So that's important. Now, another thing I'd like to mention is the setup that I just showed you is only for a gatefold. As I mentioned, the trifold's a little bit different. You have to modify what you've learned on this setup to achieve that type of setup. Some other things that I'll mention, and I've got some samples here. For instance, if you determine you want to do a accordion design, and that's a design that sort of looks like this, accordion, see? Okay. Guess what? In an accordion design, you don't have to worry about any short panels because why? No panels are folding into each other. They all lay on top of each other, so all the panels are exactly the same in an accordion fold. So no worries if you're doing an accordion. Let's see. If you're doing I had one. This one here, I showed you the right angle. This is a right angle type of fold system where this is a brochure printed piece, opens up, and then this folds up, and then this folds down. So basically what this is considered is multi-fold system. So first of all, this is considered a right angle or a French fold, and this is called a barrel roll because this kind of rolls out like a barrel. Okay, this is kind of like a barrel rolls out. Okay, so this is kind of a very complex folding system. Wouldn't recommend it, but I'm just saying in this particular scenario, since something is folding into something, this folds in, this panel down here would have to be shorter. Let me show you a simpler version of this. I've got it here. So here, they call this the barrel roll, where you open it up like this, and this kind of rolls down. This is a simpler version. In a barrel roll scenario, you do have to calculate the shorter fold because this panel right here folds inside this one and that one folds over. So this panel right here need to be shorter. So in this barrel roll scenario, if you're doing this design, you would have to have a calculation for a short fold. You would have to have a calculation for a short fold on this one where you've got a right angle and a barrel roll. Okay, so this one's a bit big. I probably wouldn't recommend it if you're actually, because in this class it'll cost you because you're going to have to go seek out printouts in this class. Yes, you are. It is an online class, but you're going to have to go seek out printouts. Sorry. If you want to completely circumvent having to calculate anything, do an accordion fold. So it'll be interesting to see how many people do accordions because you don't have to calculate anything. You can do a die cut scenario, but a word of warning, if you do design a die cut, you're going to have to actually create the die. So you'll have extra work. You'll have to do extra work if you have a die cut scenario. Just letting you know. All right, well, anyway, those were a couple of folds that may involve calculations and some that may not involve calculations. Okay. All right, so back to this. I believe that is the end of this demonstration, and when you're finished, um, you will end up with a, let's see, where's my other layout here? Fold. There. This is the finished piece. So this is what it looks like after you get graphics in there. Now, one thing to keep in mind is remember over here, you design this layout to have bleed. So what you need to keep in mind is if you have any graphics that come up to the bleed edge, you're going to have to pull them out to the bleed. Okay, so in other words, what I mean by that is, let me zoom in here. Let's say that this graphic is a, I'm going to tell it none, and we'll fill it with this. So this is your trim edge right here. Okay, this is where the paper cutter is going to trim out your brochure. If you have bleed or you want that graphic to butt up to the edge, you have to pull that to the bleed edge so that when it gets trimmed, you have a perfectly nice trimmed edge where the graphic or the photo or whatever is flush right up to the edge and there's no extra white line or misregistration there. So it's important if you've got a bleed on your project that you pull all your graphics to the bleed edge, and I have that an example of that here. So if I turn off, you can kind of see this right here. Here, you can kind of see it here. This right here is the trim edge, and this right here is the bleed. Okay. Okay. So that should conclude how to set up your document for your brochures. So I know this week you're brainstorming and you're developing sketches, but I always like to give you a heads up on where we're going next with the next week. So you will be working on setting this brochure up like this in the following weeks that come. So I believe there is one more handout, and I won't be covering the handout called How to Print Fold Marks because I think it'll just be enough for you to just get your documents set up properly. We will talk about this, how to print fold marks, in a later lecture in another week. Okay, and I think I've got everything covered. So that should conclude this week's videos. And if you have any questions, you can post those in the problems and solutions. And I am really excited to see what ideas you have this week on your possibilities for your brochure designs. Okay, so happy designing.